April 7th, 2025, Dallas, Texas. Two white pups whimper in a padded enclosure, drinking from baby bottles. This is the video where the word extinct starts to wobble. Headlines are already calling them the first extinct animal ever brought back to life. Most people assume this is simple. Extinct, then not extinct. It isn't. The company's own chief scientist admits these pups share 99.5% of their DNA with an animal that never went extinct at all. The ordinary gray wolf. The other 0.5% is where this story actually lives. Here's what's inside it. If a headline can convince millions of people that extinction is now reversible, you deserve to know exactly how much of that is biology and how much of it is branding. The question isn't whether Colossal made something real. It's whether real was ever the right word for what a species actually is. On April 7th, 2025, a company called Colossal Biosciences held a press event in Dallas, Texas. What they announced went global within hours. 3 wolf pups, 2 males, Romulus and Remus, born October 1st, 2024, 1 female born January 30th, 2025, named Khaleesi. Colossal called them dire wolves, a species that vanished from North America over 10,000 years ago. In the company's own words, this was the first successfully de-extincted animal in history. Sit with that sentence for a second. Not a new breed, not a hybrid, a resurrection. News outlets ran with it fast. CNN, ABC, the front pages of tech and science coverage worldwide within a day. Photos of 2 fluffy white puppies drinking from bottles spread across every platform that covers animals or biotech. Colossal, backed by investors like Tom Brady and Paris Hilton, had spent years building toward a headline exactly like this one. Here's the thing about a headline that big, though. It has to compress a genuinely complicated process into 6 words. Company brings back extinct species. Punch. Also, as you're about to see, doing a lot of quiet work to hold that claim together. None of this makes the announcement false. 3 real animals exist. Born using genuine, sophisticated science. But de-extinction is a word, and words carry assumptions the underlying biology doesn't always support. So before you accept or reject the claim, ask the simpler question first. What did the scientists actually change to get from a gray wolf to something they're calling a dire wolf? That number is where this story gets interesting. And it's bigger than you'd think, in exactly the wrong direction. The announcement is where the story starts. This is where it gets tested. Colossal's process began with fossils, a 13,000-year-old tooth, a 72,000-year-old skull. Researchers extracted ancient DNA from both and sequenced the dire wolf genome. Work Colossal's chief science officer Beth Shapiro says covers roughly the full picture of what made a dire wolf a dire wolf. Here's the number that matters. Dire wolves and gray wolves share 99.5% of their DNA. Not similar, identical. Sounds like the case is closed. It isn't. That remaining 0.5% can still represent millions of individual base pairs spread across thousands of genes, built up over roughly 4.5 million years of separate evolution. According to Colossal's own analysis, that's the raw material the scientists had to work with. Here's how much of it they actually touched. 20 edits across 14 genes out of roughly 19,000 genes in a wolf's genome. 20 out of 19,000. Let that sit for a second. What did those 20 changes actually target? Size, jaw structure, coat color and thickness, the visible traits, the things you'd notice in a photograph. Not the deep genetic architecture that shapes physiology, behavior, and biology at a level no camera can see. None of this makes the pups fake. They're real animals engineered through legitimate, difficult science. That part isn't in dispute. What's in dispute is the word. Because here's what this question actually turns on. If 20 visible trait edits out of thousands of genetic differences is enough to call something de-extinct, the definition of a species just got a lot more flexible than most biologists think it should be. And the people whose job is drawing that line are not staying quiet about it. 20 edits out of 19,000 genes is a fact anyone can check. What happened next is scientists checking it, publicly, by name. This isn't an anonymous internet backlash. It's named researchers on the record, in major outlets, within days of the announcement. Vincent Lynch, an evolutionary biologist at the University at Buffalo, put it bluntly. It's not a dire wolf, he told reporters. It's misleading to call it that. Anders Bergstrom at the University of East Anglia. studies canine evolution specifically. His verdict? 20 changes is not nearly enough, but it could get you a strange-looking gray wolf. David Schiffman, an environmental scientist, went further. This is not a dire wolf by any reasonable definition. He said, 3 separate experts, 3 different institutions, same conclusion independently reached. You're probably already thinking it though. So what? Scientists argue about definitions all the time. Does it actually matter what you call the animal if the engineering is real and the pups are healthy? Fair question. Here's the honest answer. It matters because Colossal didn't just make an animal that resembles a dire wolf. They told the public repeatedly that they resurrected an extinct species. That's not a shading of language. That's a specific, falsifiable claim about what happened biologically. And unlike most scientific disputes, this one wasn't settled through peer review before it went public. Colossal's genomic findings reached the world through press interviews, not a published paper, not even a preprint at the time of the announcement. So the objection here was never prove it happened. The pups clearly exist. The real objection is narrower and sharper. Prove that what happened matches the word used to describe it. So far, the people whose job is drawing that line say it doesn't. 3 named scientists calling the claim into question is one kind of pressure. What Colossal did next is more revealing than the criticism itself. Under sustained scrutiny, Chief Science Officer Beth Shapiro gave a series of interviews walking through what de-extinct actually meant to her. And the language shifted. On the record, in real time. Early on, the framing was resurrection, a species brought back. That's the version that made headlines on April 7th. But as pushback mounted from researchers like Lynch and Bergstrom, Shapiro's own description changed. Call it a de-extinct dire wolf, she said. Call it Colossal's dire wolf. Call it a gray wolf with 20 edits that looks and acts like a dire wolf and is a functional replacement. Read that again. Functional replacement. A genetics company's chief scientist voluntarily loosening the claim after the headlines had already landed. Does that mean Colossal lied at the start? Not necessarily. It might just mean the first version was written for headlines and the second was written for scientists. Either way, the gap between those 2 sentences is the whole debate, compressed into one paragraph. If you're the kind of person who wants to read those interviews yourself instead of trusting a script's summary, that instinct is exactly right, and it's easy to satisfy. Shapiro's fuller comments ran in New Scientist, USA Today, and Rolling Stone in the weeks after the announcement. Worth 5 minutes if you want the unedited version of how her language moved. We track these kinds of shifting claims across every species on this channel. So if that's the pattern that hooked you, subscribing means you'll catch it happening again, because that's really what this evidence point is, not new data. A company quietly renegotiating its own definition, under pressure, in public. Colossal's own words softened under scrutiny. Follow the money, and you start to understand why the announcement was built the way it was in the first place. Colossal Biosciences was founded in 2021 by entrepreneur Ben Lamb and Harvard geneticist George Church. By January of 2025, 3 months before the dire wolf announcement, the company had raised $435 million. Valuation $10.2 billion, Texas's first decacorn. Its investor list isn't quiet either. Tom Brady, Paris Hilton, Tiger Woods, Peter Jackson, names that generate coverage on their own long before any science gets mentioned. That's a lot of money riding on a headline landing well. Does that automatically mean the science is fake? No. Genuine researchers work at Colossal, and genuine breakthroughs in gene editing came out of this project regardless of what you call the end result. But money changes what gets emphasized. The same announcement that produced Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi also included 4 cloned red wolves, a critically endangered species with fewer than 24 left in the wild. That work drew far less coverage. It's also, by most standards, more scientifically useful. Real conservation applied to an animal that still has an ecosystem to return to. The dire wolf doesn't. Its original prey and habitat vanished along with it. Thousands of years ago, even a perfect genetic replica would have nowhere left to fill its old role. Here's the quieter question underneath the loud one then. A $10 billion company chose which story to put on the homepage. Not the endangered red wolves already alive today, 3 photogenic white pups, and a word, resurrection, that guarantees headlines whether or not it survives scientific scrutiny. The company itself doesn't dispute this framing either. Ben Lamb has said plainly that Colossal isn't a non-profit or an academic lab. It builds products. It commercializes biotechnology. And de-extinction is the platform that gets people talking about everything else the company sells. Think about that the next time a headline tells you science solved something impossible. Ask what got simplified to make the story fit in a sentence, because you're the one deciding whether resurrection is worth what it's being sold for. Picture those 2 white pups again, drinking from baby bottles in that padded Dallas enclosure. When the photos first went viral, they looked like proof. Proof that extinction had a fix. Now you know what's actually sitting inside them. 20 edits, 14 genes, out of 19,000. Nothing about this case rests on hidden data or a company that lied outright. It rests on a word, stretched further than most biologists think it should go, worn by 2 real, healthy animals who never asked to carry that argument. Romulus and Remus are not a hoax. They are also, by the account of the people who study this for a living, not quite what that first headline said they were. Maybe that gap is the whole point. Maybe extinct was never as fixed a word as we needed it to be. Colossal didn't lie about what they built. They just let you fill in the word resurrection with more meaning than 20 gene edits can carry. Subscribe for the next case where the science and the headline don't quite match.